So next we will talk about allergic conjunctivitis. Everybody knows allergic conjunctivitis, how will it present? Mainly lot of itching and watering. So this allergic conjunctivitis, we are going to learn in detail some specific types of allergies, but normally this allergic conjunctivitis could be just like an acute allergic reaction due to some pollen, or it could be seasonal or perennial. And third, which is very important for all of us, is vernal keratoconjunctivitis. And also remember another form of allergy, which is very important for you all to keep in mind, though details are not needed at your stage, is due to atopic dermatitis, that is atopic keratoconjunctivitis. So three things that we will need to mention apart from this is, and one more, that is flectanular. So this is what we are going to learn. Let's start with flectanular keratoconjunctivitis. When we say flectanular, you want me to write all the times like acute allergic reaction, or it can be seasonal or perennial. These are the different forms of allergies you can see in the eye. It could be vernal keratoconjunctivitis, atopic keratoconjunctivitis due to atopic dermatitis and allergies. Patients of atopic dermatitis have this, and flectanular. So what is required at your level is details for flectanular and vernal keratoconjunctivitis. Now we first talk about is flectanular keratoconjunctivitis. Very, very important. This is allergy towards endogenous antigen. Please remember, it is allergy towards the endogenous antigen. So this is exam question. Can you see that? I've put a Q here. Which endogenous? Earlier we used to answer tuberculosis, but we all know now our first answer has to be Staph aureus. And second would be, second option, tuberculosis. But first, always prefer Staph aureus. Right? Okay. So, this is an endogenous allergy where the patient definitely is going to present with the same features of watering and itching. And when you examine these patients, endogenous, you understand, na? So there's some infection in the body, and because of that there's allergic reaction in your eye, isn't it? Okay, so what do you see on examination here? So itching and watering, IW, I'm writing in short. IW means itching and watering. And on examination, what we see is this nodule of flectin. Flectin is nothing but a nodule near the limbus. And along with this, we will see conjunctival congestion of this eye. Right? So what we see here is conjunctival congestion. Right? Okay. Now what happens? Slowly, it is a keratoconjunctivitis. Cornea can also be involved. When it involves the cornea, this can lead to an ulcer. This is called fascicular ulcer. Exam question, please. This is what is fascicular ulcer. And this fascicular ulcer can later extend as ring ulcer. It can later extend as ring ulcer. Okay. So, another important thing they will ask you that, okay, this allergy is what type of hypersensitivity reaction? Another question. So, next question, it is type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. So, we will learn this is type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. And what will be there for the treatment? Steroids. Okay. So, it's generally treated with steroids. We would always, as you know, steroids have their own complications, cataract and glaucoma. We'll start with some mild steroids. So you can say the treatment is steroids, but let's have a look at the slide. Yeah, so if you see here, this is what is a flectin and this is the conjunctival congestion. Later it can involve this cornea, leading to that you learned as fascicular ulcer. Okay, so keep in mind what are the cues they have asked you. In the treatment part, you also keep this in mind. Sometimes in patients, there can be recurrent flectanulosis, or what you call flectanular keratoconjunctivitis. This can happen due to some associated staphylococcal blepharitis. So in that case, you may need to give some oral tetracycline treatment. Okay, keep this in mind. So if it is recurrent, we may have to look at associated blepharitis needs a treatment. You can use doxycycline also. Or just learn like this, you can treat associated blepharitis, which is mainly staphylococcal. This is also important part to remember when you're treating a flectennular keratoconjunctivitis. Correct. Now we talk about is the next important allergy which needs details is our vernal keratoconjunctivitis. We also call this spring catarrh. The primarily it is not spring, though spring is mentioned, but mainly it is the summer season where it happens. So form of misnomer may not be exactly, where some places it's also said that okay, it can happen in spring, but actually predominantly it is happening in summers, not spring. Okay, so it's a disease of the summers. And this time the allergy is exogenous allergy, dust, pollen and so on. Then number 3 we will know, this is more common, this is important, asked in the exam, more common in male children. Right? Okay. Another thing they will ask in exam, this is one conjunctivitis where there is no follicular reaction. Please remember, no follicular reaction. There is only papillary reaction. Right? These are some important points you have to keep. So once we know what is vernal keratoconjunctivitis, now we talk about how will the child present. Of course, as in any allergy, lot of itching, lot of watering. Apart from that, so write down the clinical feature, the presenting feature will be IW, itching and watering, and very, very important, this is also exam question, ropey discharge. Now why this ropey discharge? These are all mucoid deposits or mucoid discharge. Okay, so when it is stuck inside the papilla, when you remove it, it looks ropey, right? Mainly the mucoid discharge. So this is mucin or mucoid deposition. Right? So this is how the patient is presenting. So ropey discharge is a very important question. Now we will talk about on examination. We are going to make the diagram together. What are the on examination findings of vernal keratoconjunctivitis? So actually you can divide the disease form into, it can be either a palpebral form, it could be limbal form, or it could be mixed form, means it is involving both. Okay. Now, what are the findings? Draw the diagram with me. I said no follicles. So what you get here is a papillary reaction. Now this papillary reaction can be really very severe, and this is what is called cobblestone appearance. So this is what is, can you see this? These are the severe papillary reaction. We already know what is a papilla. This is what is cobblestone appearance. Right? Okay. Then we can also see the papilla on the upper limbus. Just have a look at the slides. We'll go back to the diagrams. So this is what is papillary reaction at the limbus. And at the center, as you see, these dots, these are called Horner-Trantas spots. We'll draw together. Just keep listening. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the diagram. So this is your cobblestone appearance. You just label it as cobblestone appearance. And this is your papillary hyperplasia at the upper limbus. And at its center, these whitish dots, this is what is Horner-Trantas spots. This is also double Q. Now what are Horner-Trantas spots? We will learn. These are composed of eosinophils. These are nothing but eosinophils. Again, it's a keratoconjunctivitis. So learn with me. It can involve the cornea. This subepithelial scarring is what is called Cupid's bow. Or other name of this is pseudogerontoxon. What is gerontoxon? So what is pseudogerontoxon? Gerontoxon is another name of Arcus senilis. So it looks like Arcus senilis. Therefore, we call it pseudogerontoxon. These terms are important. They have been asked. Okay. So there can be some punctate erosions anyway, and there can be Cupid's bow, that is pseudogerontoxon. And we will also not forget that any microerosions, later there is deposition of mucus and a little bit of calcium phosphonate in it. This is what we call shield ulcer. What is shield ulcer? It is nothing but, I am repeating, microerosions with deposition of lot of mucus and calcium phosphonate deposition. So this will lead to shield ulcer, right? So they can also lead to some secondary bacterial infection out there if it doesn't reepithelize quickly. Okay? So these are the findings. We next talk about is another question. What is Maxwell-Lewin sign? So they've asked you just a single one-liner. This is a feature of what it is seen in, and the answer was vernal keratoconjunctivitis. So a little bit change here. The Maxwell-Lewin sign we will speak about is about the pseudomembrane form that is due to some mucus depositions on the papilla, and when there is mucus is deposited in form of a pseudomembrane due to effect of heat, that is called Maxwell-Lewin sign. So we are going to change this here. Please remember, it is nothing but it's a pseudomembrane which is formed due to the mucoid discharge. Okay, next question. If you realize a lot of cues I have been mentioning, another question is what type of hypersensitivity? It is type 1. At your level, we will just learn type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. Okay, we just mentioned about Horner-Trantas being eosinophils, right? So that should be easy for you. Okay, so that was about vernal keratoconjunctivitis. What are the signs? What are the symptoms? Then these are the important questions that you all have to be familiar with and the terms. Okay, the question has been on shield ulcer also. This is also a cue. Even on pseudogerontoxin. So many cues here. Treatment. Now when you talk about the treatment, of course, I would like to first start with anti-allergics. I will not avoid steroids, isn't it? So what are the anti-allergics I can give? Anti-allergics either I can go for is, number 1, I start with the latest ones if you ask me, has a dual action. They are both mast cell stabilizer and antihistaminic like olopatadine. So these days if I'm starting with any allergic conjunctivitis treating, we prefer this. Okay. So olopatadine is both antihistaminic and mast cell stabilizer. Mast cell stabilizer. Okay, so this is how we start. Another with the dual action can be azilastine. This also has the dual action. Let's talk about the common ones that we are using. I don't want to give you a list of names, keep on learning it, but the azilastine we all know. Then we talk about mast cell stabilizer. Everybody knows about sodium chromoglycate. So we can give a simple mast cell stabilizer like sodium chromoglycate. Right? What else I can go for? Any other mast cell stabilizer? Nidochromal. So we can note down nidochromal sodium. Nidochromal sodium. We can even give a simple antihistaminics. We generally go for epinastine. It can have dual action also, but generally primarily it is antihistaminic. So epinastine, or one more name you can know, bepotastine. And earlier there's vasoconstrictors like nefazoline or xylometazoline were given, but generally what happens because of the tachyphylactic effect, that means the effect decreases with too much of use. So we are hardly using it these days. Okay. If nothing works, what we give? We go for steroids. So we will go for topical steroids, and we are going to prefer the mild steroids. Which one? Like fluoromethalone. Fluoromethalone, write down. Right? Or it could be, the next common that we use here is loteprednisolone. Okay? Etabonate. So we can go for mild steroids. And of course, lot of mucus, so let's also give acetylcysteine eye drops to dissolve the mucus. Okay, so we will give acetylcysteine in vernal keratoconjunctivitis. Now a few points once we know how you manage this. So next we talk about here is your little bit some few points regarding atopic keratoconjunctivitis. You can learn it very easily if we just look at the differences from vernal. Atopic keratoconjunctivitis is more common in colder regions, colder climate, more in temperate regions. Okay, so it aggravates in cold, more common in winters, becomes bad in winters. This is what I want to say. Secondly, here there is no, it is more that vernal keratoconjunctivitis was mainly in children. This is mainly in adults. Males were involved, male children, here no gender predilection. Okay, no gender predilection. Right? Okay. Apart from that, let's also remember one term regarding this which we have learnt in our lens chapter, and that is shield cataract. Shield ulcer, this one shield cataract, easy to learn. So shield cataract is again a finding of atopic dermatitis. So this has been your exam question. It's an anterior subcapsular cataract. Right? Okay. Now one or two more things that needs mention here is too much rubbing. Because especially in vernal also, but more common in atopic is too much rubbing of the eyes, which can lead to skin fold. What is that called? That is called Denny Morgan folds. I'll just show you what is Denny Morgan folds. This is due to excessive rubbing of the eyes. Let's have a look at the slides. So we just saw the cobblestone appearance. We saw this Horner-Trunta spots. This is limba vernal. This is all is your Cupid's bow. The arrow is showing you subepithelial scarring. This is Cupid's bow. Okay. This is your shield ulcer of vernal keratoconjunctivitis. And this you can say like a pseudomembrane formation, which we learned, a lot of mucus on the papilla, Maxwell-Lewin sign. Mucoid discharge on the papilla. See this skin fold that we are talking about. This is these lines that are formed. This is due to excessive rubbing, right? Here in this case, we are showing you a child, generally commonly, or it could be an adult, whatever. But these folds are due to excessive rubbing, right? So this is what is called Denny Morgan folds. So she could be just a case of vernal keratoconjunctivitis, though again it's not common more in males, but she could be, or it could be an atopic case. So this is Denny Morgan folds. Right? And another thing that you have to know in atopic is loss of lateral 1/3 of the eyebrows. So madarosis. What is that called? Madarosis is both loss of eyelashes and loss of eyebrow is also called madarosis. So this madarosis in atopic, when there is a loss like this, see? Can you see this? Lateral 1/3, this is gone. This is what is also called Hartoge's sign. Can we learn this? This is also called Hartoge's sign. Again, this is a feature of atopic keratoconjunctivitis. One more thing needs a mention. Go back to your vernal where you have made the diagram. So when the cornea where you are writing everything here, too much of rubbing can even lead to keratoconus. In vernal keratoconjunctivitis, children are prone for keratoconus. This is again due to constant rubbing. Okay, Denny Morgan folds is one, and this is again due to constant rubbing. This child of vernal keratoconjunctivitis can be prone to keratoconus. It's an important point, keep in mind. Okay, great. So that was about allergic. So what do you all remember what can be the other causes of madarosis or loss of lateral 1/3 apart from atopic keratoconjunctivitis? Please don't forget about leprosy and myxedema. Okay, so all these are causes of loss of lateral 1/3 of the eyebrows. Right? Hartoge's sign. Okay? Note this down. And also remember, if it is a severe allergy, then we may have to shift to immunomodulators like cyclosporine or calcineurin inhibitors like tacrolimus. If you want, you can note down under the treatment, where in case of mainly atopic, if it is not responding, we may have to shift to cyclosporine as immunomodulators. We can go for cyclosporine eye drops in either allergy, okay? Cyclosporine eye drops. and also, or the other one is the calcineurin inhibitor, that is your tacrolimus. Can we add this in the treatment part? You can add it here, right? If your steroids are not effective, or if you want to spare steroid sparing treatment, you want to shift to that, then you can use this. Okay, we next talk about is xerophthalmia. So the condition which is due to vitamin A deficiency, that spectrum of ocular disease, that is called xerophthalmia. Okay, so write down what is xerophthalmia. It is nothing but spectrum of ocular disease due to vitamin A deficiency. I hope you have written. It is spectrum of ocular disease due to vitamin A deficiency. Okay, so once we know this, what are the clinical features? You can learn very nicely by WHO grading of xerophthalmia. Right? So what is the WHO grading of xerophthalmia? We can divide as XN. X stands for xerophthalmia. So XN is night blindness, which is called nyctalopia. Night blindness is nyctalopia. Then X1AB. A, it is conjunctival drying or xerosis. Severe drying is called xerosis. It's a severe drying which is called xerosis. And when it is too severe, the patch of dry spot that you see near the limbus is called B for B, Bitot spot. Okay, we come to X2. Now the cornea starts drying, so there is a corneal xerosis. Everybody knows now vitamin A is a very important component for health of epithelial lining and also very important component of rods. So initially what will happen is the function of rods are affected, you get night blindness, and then next what you're getting is conjunctival xerosis, then corneal xerosis. Then again 3 is divided as A and B. This keratomalacia in less than 1/3 of cornea, involving less than 1/3 of cornea is A, and keratomalacia involving more than 1/3 is B. What is keratomalacia? Liquefactive necrosis of the cornea. Okay, so it is liquefactive necrosis of the cornea. Please remember that. And then comes your excess where there is a corneal scarring, right? So corneal scarring. And then lastly, XF is xerophthalmic fundus. How does it look like? So the xerophthalmic fundus means there are white spots on the fundus. So a white spotted fundus is called xerophthalmic fundus. Right? Okay. So when it affects the fundus, definitely we see that there is decreased amplitude in electroretinogram. There is also decreased amplitude in the electroretinogram. We'll talk about electroretinogram in retina chapter of ERG. So ERG, just to tell you here, is telling the activity of layers of rods and cones and bipolar cells. So because rods are affected, we get a decreased amplitude. So this much as of now. Now, once we know what are the features, one more thing here. So this I think you all know is shield cataract. Come to this one. So this is your Bitot spot, right? So this Bitot spot is, the question is, it is more common on which side? So please answer temporally. As you can see, it's a dry spot. It's a foamy look with keratinized epithelium. So if you want to describe this, this is mainly keratinized epithelium. Right? Along with that, there is infection by Corynebacterium xerosis. Hope you're noting down. Okay, so this is what is your Bitot spot. Then they have also asked you another question, which is the earliest feature of vitamin A deficiency. Here we will answer nyctalopia. Earliest feature, nyctalopia. One more question they have asked on what is the change, pathological changes in the conjunctiva whenever there is any vitamin A deficiency. I told you it's for the epithelial health. So what happens in case of xerophthalmia? There will be loss of goblet cells. Please note down. And very important, squamous metaplasia. This is your exam question. Make a Q and note down, please. This is squamous metaplasia. And you can add here is with keratinization. So squamous metaplasia was your exam question. Okay? Right. So now we know what are the questions asked from this topic. Coming to treatment. Naturally, you are going to give vitamin A. Depends on the age of the child. If the child is more than 1 year, injectable vitamin A is given this is important for you to learn, 1 lakh international unit on 0, 1 and 14th day. Today, tomorrow and on 14th day. Please remember, it's important. And if your patient is less than 1 year, you just half the dose. Easy? And if you have to give oral, you just double the dose in each. Okay? For oral, it is always double of the injectable. Right? So this is how we are going to, so this was again treatment is also asked in exam. So when you're talking about the treatment, what would be the local treatment that you can give for the dryness? Common sense. So this was systemic. Local, we can go for intense lubrication with lubricating eye drops, right? So please remember, topical treatment with lubricating eye drops, number 1. Methyl cellulose derivatives preferably, or sodium hyaluronate, which is also very viscous, right? And secondly, we can also give retinoic acid, okay? So retinoic acid can be given. This will be the topical treatment for xerophthalmia. Okay. Once we know this, we also have to ponder about what are the causes of nyctalopia. So give the heading, nyctalopia, what are the causes of night blindness apart from xerophthalmia? Of course, first I will write xerophthalmia, which is most common. So please write this, very important. Okay, remember one more question here. They had asked you, which is the most common ocular feature of measles? Answer again is vitamin A deficiency. You want to note down? Note down. Most common ocular feature of measles, vitamin A deficiency. Okay, then we talk about nyctalopia causes xerophthalmia. Retinitis pigmentosa. Okay, we will learn in retina chapter. High myopia. Any myopia more than 6 is high myopia. Late stage of primary open angle glaucoma. Then some retinal conditions like congenital stationary night blindness. Night blindness. The congenital stationary night blindness, we will learn 2 forms, very important. One is fundus albi punctatus. Albi means white, punctatus means dots. So this is congenital night blindness with white spotted fundus. This is what we mean. Okay. So this is fundus albi punctatus. Second type is Oguchi's disease. This is your exam question. We put a Q here. Oguchi's disease. This is again stationary. Stationary means it's not progressive. Congenital night blindness with pale fundus. The fundus is not that red, it is pale. This is called pale fundus. Have a look. So if you look here, this is a pale fundus, it is not red. This is what is Oguchi's disease. Night blindness with pale fundus. One more slide, have a look here. This is what is keratomalacia. Right? Okay. Go back to Oguchi's. One more important question I'm writing here only. What is Mezo's phenomena? Also called Nakamura-Mezo's phenomena. This was your exam question. Mezo's phenomenon is, so this patient has night blindness. When you look at his fundus, it is pale. Now ask the patient to sit for 1 hour in dark. So 1 hour in dark, what we see, no night blindness, fundus is normal. Everything reverts. Fundus is normal. This is what is called Mesos phenomenon. Why it is happening? What is the cause? We will learn mean etiology here is so what happens is the number of rods in these patients are less. But when they are made to sit for 1 hour in dark, there is overstimulation of the rods. And this overstimulation of rods will lead to Mesos phenomenon. So what is the cause? If they ask you, it is overstimulation of rods. Okay? So keep this in mind and then come to the causes. Apart from this congenital stationary, number 6, we will write as some choroidal dystrophies. And the two that needs mention, one is, you should know, is choroideremia, which can lead to night blindness. And second is here, gyrate atrophy. Choroideremia and gyrate atrophy. So next question was on gyrate atrophy. Let's have a look. So see, this is what is gyrate atrophy. You can see atrophic patches on the choroid. These atrophic patches. So gyrate, actually what is asked is, I am writing here, please note down. It is due to deficiency of ornithine aminotransferase. Deficiency of ornithine aminotransferase. And because there is disturbance in the urea cycle, okay, so this deficiency in this enzyme ornithine aminotransferase is disturbing the urea cycle. What we are getting in eye is atrophic patches on the choroid. And if you see here, this can also be one of the causes of tunnel vision. We'll talk about it more. Okay, just keep in mind, it can be a cause of tunnel vision. Now, what was the question asked? Treatment. And the answer was arginine-free diet. Just remember this much, more than enough. Why arginine-free diet? Because arginine is a precursor of ornithine. So what you give here is arginine-free diet. We can also give vitamin B6, pyridoxine is also given, but we'll mainly remember arginine-free diet. Okay, so that was about gyrate atrophy. So these are the causes of nyctalopia. Then we talk about hemerlopia, that is day blindness. What can be the causes of hemerlopia? The causes of hemerlopia, think yourself, daytime the pupil is constricted, so any opacity in the center will lead to day blindness. So we can say central corneal opacity, right? Then central lenticular opacity, even that can lead to day blindness. And also congenital absence of cones. Congenital absence of cones are responsible for day vision. So congenital absence of cones. Good. Come to our next heading, conjunctival degenerations. And the main one where a lot of questions have been asked is pterygium. So conjunctival degenerations, if we talk about, one degenerative condition very important at your level is pterygium. Okay, make the diagram. I know everybody knows what is pterygium. So look at this. We all know this triangular fibrovascular subepithelial ingrowth, isn't it? So this is the fibrovascular subepithelial ingrowth. It is a subepithelial ingrowth of bulbar conjunctiva over the limbus. Can we write it? What is pterygium? Write down here. I am writing for you. Please make the diagram also. Draw it on your copy like this. And now write the diagram and write the definition. Write down. It is a triangular fibrovascular subepithelial ingrowth of bulbar conjunctiva. Over the limbus. Okay, over the limbus. Okay, we come to a lot of questions are there. So we start from here. What can be the cause? UVB exposure is very important. So write down etiology, UV exposure. Question is which rays, UVA or UVB? So we answer here UVB rays, right? Okay. Right. So when you say It is UVB rays. This is one question. What else UVB can cause apart from pterygium? You should also know this. Sorry, I'm deviating a little, but you should know this at this point. UVB can lead to snow blindness, which is called photophthalmia. Right? So photophthalmia is also called snow blindness. Why do you call it snow blindness? Because when you're in the snow, the UVB will be reflected from the snow and injure your eye. What it causes is corneal epithelial erosions. It causes corneal epithelial erosions. Right? So simple treatment is pad and bandage with antibiotic ointment. How you treat here? Pad and bandage with antibiotic ointment. Right? So once we know this, we should also know what is photoretinitis. We know photophthalmia. Photoretinitis क्या होता है? Photoretinitis is injury by infrared rays. Okay? So we will say photoretinitis. This is injury by infrared rays. So you generally see when you directly look at the solar eclipse with unaided eyes, you can get a photoretinitis. Now this one is causing serious thing. It causes macular burn. And this macular burn later leads to macular scar. Okay? Of course, you cannot treat a scar. So whatever vision is lost is lost. Oh, let's come back to pterygium. So causes generally exposure to UVB rays. That's one question. Next question is, it is more common on which side? Pterygium is more common nasally. Just remember this. Both Pingicula, I'll talk about Pingicula, and pterygium are more common nasally. Learn like this. Okay, then third thing, then how will it present? What is the clinical feature? So generally pterygium is not causing much problem if it is not covering the pupil. It is mainly cosmetic. Of course, second could be, it may lead to astigmatism. Right? And third, it can also lead to, if it, and make the diagram all of you, if it encroaches the pupil cover, it can lead to diminution of vision. Right? Okay. What is the histology? They can ask you, what is actually happening? Please remember, it is again elastotic degeneration of stromal collagen. Okay, so elastotic degeneration of conjunctiva or conjunctival stroma. This is enough. Please remember the change is same for both pterygium and Pingicula. The histologically they are same. It is elastotic degeneration of the conjunctival stroma. Okay, this is ours. That's why I'm mentioning it like that. Okay, so once we know this, then we talk about is, they have also asked you one question here. Okay, if you look at the pterygium, let's first talk about that also. That what are the parts of pterygium? Right? So you see this is the body and this is the head. Right? Okay. So body and head, and there can also be some avascular halo zone here. This avascular zone that is formed, avascular halo. In front at the tip is what is cap. This becomes the cap. So there is a cap, there is a head, and there is a body. Why are you getting this avascular halo zone? This is due to some enzymes, okay? Destruction of the Bowman's membrane by metalloproteinases. So this is all due to some enzymatic destruction of Bowman's membrane. And one more thing, I think everybody knows what is Stocker's line. Stocker's is when there is deposition of iron at the head of the pterygium. This is what is called Stocker's line. Again, important to know this. Right? Exam question. Right. Okay. Then we talk about, once we know the different parts of pterygium, we know what problem it can cause. Another interesting thing is, how do you differentiate pterygium from pseudopterygium? So, pseudopterygium means any scarring which is looking like a pterygium is pseudopterygium. So, what we go for is glass rod test. So, this is again exam question, guys. What is glass rod test here? Pass the glass rod under the pterygium. If it passes easily, it is pseudopterygium. Please remember this. So many of you message me, ma'am, is it opposite? No, it is not. Please remember, pseudopterygium is free. It is only attached at the apex. So the glass rod can pass easily, but in pterygium, it will not pass. So not pass means it is true pterygium. Okay? No confusions here, please. Okay? So it passes easily through pseudo, because remember, pseudopterygium is only attached to the apex. Great. Now we talk about treatment. Excise it. Okay? I am excising it. What next? One thing is you simply excise and just remove all the tissue, tenons, capsule, episclera, create a Bayer's sclera. So that treatment is called Bayer's sclera technique. The simple incision with creating a Bayer's sclera is Bayer's sclera technique. What do we see? What is the problem in Bayer's sclera technique? High rate of recurrence. This is important. Around 37 to 40% recur. So patient is really going to kill you. Wow, what is this? How you have operated? Kya kiya aapne? Then, what to do next? What is the other modality? So how to prevent recurrence? We come to some other modalities. To prevent recurrence, keep writing along with me, okay? So to prevent recurrence, either I go for mitomycin C. I can give it pre-operatively, per-operatively, post-operatively. If I am giving per-operatively or intraoperative, I have to be very careful. I don't keep it for too long. There's a high risk of scleral necrosis. Okay, so mitomycin C is one antimitotic drug which I can use to prevent any, recurrence. And the second option I can go for is autografting. Comes the next question here, which is the most effective method to prevent recurrence? We will answer autografting. Okay, so this is most effective. How do we do it? Let's understand now. What do we do in autografting? Let's see. So what I do is, from the superior temporal quadrant or outer quadrant, generally superior temporal, we are cutting a block of conjunctiva from the same eye. So this is the pterygium I have removed, and this is a Bayer's sclera. Dotted line means removed. Now what I do, if this is what I do when I am excising this conjunctiva, I deliberately excise, I dissect little further to include limbal stem cells. Okay? There has to be some problem in limbal stem cells, because these limbal stem cells are mainly responsible to stop the growth of conjunctiva over the cornea. But here it is happening. Okay? So the limbal stem cells are a little bit dissected so that I can transplant into the affected area. Here this is the X side of the graph and this is the Y side. Now it is very simple, but only thing that has to be taken care of when I am stitching, X should be here, Y should be here. It should not be opposite. Well, this simple method is called autografting. So many of you ask, ma'am, what will happen here? So the conjunctiva regenerates very easily. If you want to really adhere it, you can even stitch it. Stitching will always cause pricking sensation. I don't want to use a suturing there, I can go for a tissue glue, or I may just leave it, even then it regenerates. Okay? So otherwise we can use tissue fibrin glue. This is autografting. Now comes your another very recent question. What is perfect surgery related to? Perfect surgery is not, so it's a full form of something. It is not perfect means, but it is actually perfect because the recurrence rate is almost 0.1%. What does it stand for? Before I come to what does it stand for, what is perfect surgery? Keep listening to the story here. What we do in this is, it is a modification of autografting where we now excise and create a Bayer's sclera to a larger area. And common sense, I will need a larger graft to attach to it. So everything I am doing in a over enthusiastic way. So it was seen that if I do like this, recurrence is almost 0. Hence, we call it perfect surgery. Stands for pterygium. See, if you understood this, you will understand the full form. So write down, it is pterygium extended resection, isn't it? It is an extended resection. F is followed by extended conjunctival transplantation. Extended conjunctival transplantation. So this is what is perfect surgery. Please make a cue. It's an important recent question. Okay? So that was about pterygium. So many questions from here. Next we were talking about, yeah, it's just a yellowish white mound near the limbus. Let's have a look. Okay, let's have a look here. So can you see this yellowish mound near the limbus? This is what is called pinguicula. So first of all, it does not contain fat, though it looks like. Keep in mind. Okay, again I told you what it is. It is elastotic degeneration of the conjunctival stroma. Another important thing, it is again more common nasally. I can leave it, it is not causing any problem, it is innocuous. If it inflames, I will treat accordingly. Okay, so any pinguiculitis may need some steroid treatment, mild steroids and lubricants. So you can write down, if it is inflamed, I may use mild steroids or lubricants. Otherwise, we can leave it. Right? Excision is generally not preferred. Okay? If you want to excise, you may excise it also. But people are generally apprehensive getting a surgery done in the eye, and because it is not causing much problem, it's generally left there. These are the points they will ask you for pinguicula. Right? And very important, it will not encroach the cornea. Done? Okay. So the last thing we are left with here is dry eye. Okay, so give the heading dry eye. So what are the layers of the tear film? So talking about the layers of the tear film, we should all know, if this is, so it's simply depicted like this. On the cornea, first layer would be mucin layer. This is the cornea. Then comes your aqueous layer. As you see, this is the thickest layer is aqueous layer. Can you see that? And then the uppermost is your lipid layer. So these are the three layers. That is your mucin, aqueous and lipid layer. Can we draw together? So the three layers of the tear film, lowermost, I generally go for simple diagram. So we will say mucin layer. From where is it formed, all of you? Goblet cells of conjunctiva. Did we all solve this question? Maximum goblet cells are in inferonasal part. What is the role of mucin? It will help to spread the tear on the ocular surface. If you want to write it. It will help to spread the tear on the ocular surface. Thickest, aqueous layer. Aqueous is formed by lacrimal, accessory lacrimal. Okay, so main lacrimal gland, mainly responsible for all the basal secretion, and accessory lacrimal glands for the reflex secretion. Okay, you know, no? Accessory I showed you, it is mainly in the fornix area. You get the accessory lacrimal gland. You also see it in the caruncle. I mentioned that also. Anyway, so then this is your aqueous layer. And what is the main role of aqueous? Is lubrication. What was the main role of mucin layer? To help the tear to spread on the ocular surface. So this was to spread the tear on ocular surface. And this is lubrication. Okay, coming to the uppermost. Uppermost is your lipid layer. Lipid layer is formed by meibomian glands in the lens. And what is the main role of lipid layer, all of you? Prevents evaporation of tear. It prevents evaporation of tear. Done? Okay. What is dry eye? So dry eye is when there is deficiency of any of these three layers which is causing dryness is dry eye. Okay, and I'll tell you one more thing. Dry eye disease, when we say, it means it has started causing ocular inflammations. Anyway, that is not much asked at your level. We will just know deficiency of any of these three layers leading to general dry eye is what is we call as dry eye, that is inadequate volume or function of the tear film or unstable tear film. Okay, so this is what is dry. So you can just, making life simple, write down deficiency of any of three layers can lead to dry eye. DE is dry eye here. Okay, all of you, what is keratoconjunctivitis sicca? This was your exam question. Please remember, keratoconjunctivitis sicca is Q lagao, deficiency of only the aqueous layer. It is deficiency of aqueous layer is KCS. And when this KCS is associated with dry mouth, which is called xerostomia, and this is what is called primary Sjogren syndrome. You all know this? Primary Sjogren's. And when this primary is associated with connective tissue disorders, connective tissue disorders, especially we are talking about rheumatoid arthritis more commonly, this will lead to secondary Sjogren's. Now it causes secondary Sjogren's syndrome. Okay? So there's another exam question out here, that what is the most common ocular feature of rheumatoid arthritis? So if they ask you most common ocular feature, we will answer KCS, keratoconjunctivitis secca. Please remember this. Right. So now you know what is dry eye, what is KCS, what is primary Sjogren's, and what is secondary Sjogren's. Coming to clinical feature, how will this patient of dry eye present? Of course, very important is burning sensation. And because of lot of mucus and debris, there will be gritty sensation of foreign body sensation. Lot of mucus and deposition. And if it is very severe, that means it is involving the precorneal tear film, the tear film which is in front of the cornea, then it is going to lead to diminution of vision. So if the precorneal tear film is involved, this is going to lead to marked, it can be marked diminution as well. So it affects the vision as well. Okay, so once we have understood this, what are the things that I am going to see in this patient? I can see a lot of mucus deposition. I can see also, even due to the extreme dryness, there can be changes in the cornea leading to corneal epithelial keratitis and filamentous keratitis. Okay, we will write it. Wait. So, all this mucus deposition, on examination, what we can see, first thing that we see is tear meniscus. Let's remember like this. Tear meniscus, when I see the height of the tear meniscus is lower, this is called TMH, tear meniscus height. So, this becomes the first examination which I do through the slit lamp, and I see a tear meniscus height is less. When this is less, what is the normal? Normal is at least 0.2 to 0.4 millimeter in height. Okay, anything less than 0.25, this you should have to remember. This is an indication of dry eye. DE here is dry eye. Iske alawa, what else I can see the findings? I said there could be punctate epithelial keratitis. Should we write like this? No, we should make a diagram here. Yeah, so let's make a diagram here to understand something like on examination finding, we always make a diagram. This is your lower tear meniscus height, right? Then there can be punctate keratitis, punctate epithelial keratitis. We can get mucus filaments or just mucus deposition. Okay? So these can be some of the findings when I am looking this patient on the slit lamp in a case of dry eye. Coming to investigation. So let's have a look here. So this is all mucus deposition, and this is the mucus filament here, right? In form of filament. This deposition, this is your mucus. Look at this one. Again, this is all filamentous mucus. Correct? Okay. This is your punctate epithelial keratitis, and this is again mucus. So these are the findings you may get in cases of severe dry eye. And of course, also remember this, that dry eye has become one of the most common things these days because of all the time staring on the screen. Isn't it? So when you're studying with me, again, please don't forget to blink. That is very, very important. So our frequency of blinking decreases because we concentrate on the screen for too long. So we have to remind ourselves to blink. And maybe on and off we can use our lubricating eye drops. All those who are wearing specs, they have a little bit of benefit here because the evaporation will be less if there is a screen in front of them already, right? And you can even use some anti-glare screen on your specs. That is also common these days. Okay, coming back to what are the investigations. Give the heading investigation. So the first is, I have told you, this is mainly, should be either mentioned under investigation or on examination. But whatever it is, under the slit lamp, what I am seeing here is the tear meniscus height. We have already mentioned this. When you do an OCT, you can see this TMH is tear meniscus height. Okay, the test that we will do, and here again this is grading, we will not go into detail how tear meniscus is lessening, decreasing. Okay, then so the next important test that we have to understand. So from here we will start the investigation as Schirmer's test. First was slit lamp examination. It was on examination. Then the Schirmer's test. Schirmer's test is done with the tear strip. The tear strip is called Whatman paper. Okay, so this Whatman paper. So you should know this. That what is the name of this paper? It is Whatman paper. Number 41. You are putting under the lower lid for 5 minutes and then you see how much it is wet. Please remember, any wetting of less than 5 mm is a severe dry eye. What is the normal wetting we expect? Likho, normal should be at least around 15 mm. Okay, so that is about your Schirmer's test. If they ask you what is Schirmer's 1, what is Schirmer's 2, I don't think they have asked you ever in your PG entrance, but just know it. Schirmer's 1 means I am not using any anesthetic drop, so I am measuring both basal as well as reflex secretion. Whereas in Schirmer's 2, S2 is Schirmer's 2, I am only seeing the basal secretion because I am using some topical anesthesia. Just one line, you should know this. Okay, so that is Schirmer's 1, Schirmer's 2. If you know, and this is how this is showing you a severe dry eye. Now you don't want to wait for so long. If you don't want to wait for 5 minutes also, you want this thing to happen quickly, we can go to the next test. So write down all of you, this is number 2, phenol red thread test. So this thread is impregnated with the phenol red. Now it is coated as yellow. When it will come in contact with the tear, due to the change of the pH, the color of the thread becomes orange or red. How much color changes happen? If it is less than equal to 6 mm, this is a severe dry eye. Some sources say 9 mm, some say 6. Let's take 6 now. Okay? So again we are seeing the length of the thread where there is a color change. That is what is seen. Now here I have to only wait for 15 seconds, nothing more. 15 seconds. This is tear film breakup time. Number 3, write down tear film breakup time. What do you do here? You ask the patient, you are looking in the slit lamp, maybe you use a fluorescein dye as you see here. Ask the patient to blink once and then keep staring. So once he blinks, from the last blink, what is the time taken for the first dry spot to appear? Right? From the last blink, the first dry spot to appear. If it is less than 10 seconds, it is again a severe dry eye. So in this case, all these black spots that you see, this is what is your dry spot. This is black is dry spots. Now, always do it at least 3 times to check whether I am getting the dry spot on the same location. If it is so, that means there is some surface defect of the cornea. In that case, the reliability of the test is lost. Another important thing, this test will be affected in aqueous layer deficiency, and this test will also be affected in lipid layer wherever there is a meibomian gland dysfunctions. Where the lipid layer is involved, it will help to diagnose that also, and aqueous layer deficiency. When you talk about Schirmer's test, phenol red, this is all of these are mainly aqueous, that is they are measuring the volume of the tear. And please remember, this is not a test for mucin deficiency. Some people generally answer like this. So that is wrong. Okay. What is the next test I can go for? I can go for staining. Rose Bengal staining. So the next test that I can go for is Rose Bengal staining, or I may use Lizamine. Rose Bengal stings a lot, so I can use, if it is stinging a lot, you can go for Lizamine green. Both these stains are staining the dead cells and mucus. Okay, so in a case of dry eye, this is the staining that you will see. This is not hemorrhagic conjunctivitis. It's a uniformly colored thing here. This is Rose Bengal staining of dry eye. So this is the Lizamine green stain. And what is fluorescein stain, all of you? Dead cells. The defective epithelium. Hai na? So whenever there is break in the epithelium, any ulcer, that is stained by fluorescein. So this is your Lizamine green, which is staining dead cells and mucus. Okay. See, this is severe dry eye with so much of the conjunctiva taking the Rose Bengal stain. This is all Rose Bengal stain. Okay, come to the next test. Next test can be your tear osmolality measurement. Okay, so tear osmolality is increased in patients of dry eye. Right? So tear osmolality measurements, values you don't need to learn, and sometimes even the tear constituent can be seen. Check for. Again, I'm not going to too many details at this level, but we all know there is lactoferrin, so antibacterial properties in the tear. This lactoferrin is decreasing in patients of dry eye. Okay, so lactoferrin decreases in patients of dry eye. Okay? Okay. Another investigation, just to complete the list, meniscometry, which we have just seen how we are actually checking the tear meniscus height. We can do it with the OCT. That is called tear meniscometry. And if I want to really find out some problem in the mucin layer, I should look for goblet cells. And here comes the test, that is impression cytology, to see the number of goblet cells. What we go for is impression cytology for the goblet cell number. So these are the investigations for dry eye. Right? Okay. Then we talk about, after this, is treatment. So dry eye treatment, of course, it can be either medical or surgical. First we will take as medical. What will be the main eye drops? We all know it is lubricating eye drops. So we are giving all types of lubricants and tear substitutes. Most commonly used is asked in the exam, we will write methyl cellulose derivatives. Methyl cellulose derivatives. What can be the other lubricants? You should know. One is combination of polyvinyl alcohol with povidone. Polyvinyl alcohol with povidone. TS plus के नाम से. Okay. Or you can go for, apart from that, some more viscous one, even better than methyl cellulose, can be hyaluronates. Hyaluronate derivatives. Am I supposed to give anything else as a medical therapy? Yes, I can go for some acetylcysteine eye drops to dissolve all that mucus that you saw. So acetylcysteine eye drops as a mucolytic. And if there is inflammation in the ocular surface, which we call dry eye disease, then of course I may need some generally I will prefer, not topical steroids can be given, but we prefer more commonly cyclosporine, which is an immunomodulator. Right? And we should also look for any lid abnormality, any meibomitis. So you have to management of the lid pathology so that we take care of any lipid deficiency like meibomitis. Right? This will all be your medical therapy. And then can you think of what can be the surgical therapy of dry eye? Close the puncta from where the tear is draining. So it is lacrimal, surgical write down, lacrimal punctal occlusion. What we do is lacrimal punctal occlusion. Now this can be either done as a temporary measure, or it could be done as a permanent thing in a very, very severe cases. So temporary measure that we go for is either a collagen plugs are there, which you can dissolve in a shorter time, few weeks, or maybe little more longer, like few months. Or it could be silicone plugs. Silicone plugs are again reversible. You can remove them whenever you want. Okay? So for prolonged occlusion, I can use silicone plug, which is removed. Collagen plugs are mainly dissolvable. Okay. So it could be either few weeks or sometimes few months, extended ones are also there. But for the longer time, silicone plugs, which I can remove, can be used. These are all temporary measures. Permanent would be thermal cautery of the proximal canaliculus. So dilate the puncta and go for thermal cautery of proximal canaliculi. Of the proximal canaliculi. Okay. So if you're just cauterizing a little bit of the punctal area, that can open. Sometimes we do it before a cataract surgery if we have any doubt of any problem there.